The porcelain cup rattled against its saucer. Rebecca Anderson's fingers gripped the wheelchair's armrest as she watched him, the man from the dating app, pause 3 feet from her table, his smile faltering the instant his gaze dropped to the chrome wheels. He muttered something about the wrong person, turned on his heel, and disappeared into the Saturday afternoon crowd. The cafe's warmth turned suffocating. Every conversation around her felt like a spotlight on the empty chair across from her. Then a small voice cut through the noise. "Daddy, that's the prettiest chair I've ever seen." A little girl in paint-splattered overalls broke free from her father's hand, heading straight for Rebecca. Troy Bennett's face flushed crimson as he rushed after his daughter, apologies already forming on his lips. Rebecca braced herself for pity, for awkward explanations, for all the things she'd endured for 3 years. She had no idea that this interruption, this moment she wanted to escape, would shatter every wall she'd built and reveal what she'd been searching for all along. Rebecca had arrived 40 minutes early at the Riverside Café, positioning her wheelchair at the corner table, where sunlight pooled through tall windows. The café smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, sounds of conversation and espresso machines creating a comfortable hum. Outside, joggers passed along the riverside path, couples walked hand in hand, children chased pigeons. She was 34, CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, a company she'd built from nothing. Magazine covers, TED Talks, 200 employees. None of it mattered when men saw chrome wheels before they saw her. Her assistant Valerie had convinced her to try the dating app with gentle persistence about deserving happiness. Rebecca had used photos from before the accident, from when she'd skied down Colorado mountains without fear. She'd justified it by telling herself she'd explain everything once they met. But the man who'd just walked away had looked at her like she'd committed fraud. Her throat tightened as she reached for her coffee, hands steady even when her heart hammered with humiliation. The logical part of her brain said to leave, but the stubborn part refused. That's when Jasmine Bennett crashed into her life like a 6-year-old hurricane. The little girl had wild brown curls escaping from lopsided pigtails, overalls covered in every color of paint imaginable. She approached Rebecca's table with fearless curiosity. "That's the prettiest chair I've ever seen. It has such shiny wheels. Does it go really fast?" Troy Bennett appeared behind his daughter, mortification painting his face. He was tall and lean, with sawdust clinging to his flannel shirt and carpenter jeans. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. She doesn't—" "We didn't mean to interrupt." Rebecca surprised herself by laughing, a real laugh from somewhere deep in her chest. "It's okay," she said, meeting Jasmine's curious gaze. Troy's mortification deepened as he glanced at the empty chair across from Rebecca, at the untouched coffee waiting. Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, recognition of loneliness. "Are you waiting for someone?" The question hung weighted with possibility. Rebecca could have lied. Instead, she heard herself say, "I was, but it seems I'm free now." Troy hesitated, clearly torn. "I'm Troy Bennett, and this little tornado is Jasmine." Rebecca shook his hand, noticing his grip was firm without being performative. "Rebecca Anderson," she replied. Something passed between them, two adults recognizing loneliness in each other. Jasmine asked if they could have coffee together because her daddy needed to sit down. Troy looked mortified, but Rebecca said she'd love the company. Troy pulled out the chair, and Jasmine scrambled in, already chattering about her painting. As Troy ordered hot chocolate for Jasmine and coffee for himself, Rebecca found herself studying him, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gentleness in how he listened. "I'm a carpenter. Custom furniture mostly," Troy said when she asked about his work. "Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills and lets me pick Jasmine up from school every day." Jasmine interjected, describing the castle bed and animal-carved bookshelf her daddy had made. Rebecca admitted she'd always admired people who could create with their hands. Troy's eyebrows raised when she mentioned boardrooms. When she explained she ran a tech company, he simply nodded and said that explained her CEO posture. He demonstrated with his shoulders, making Jasmine giggle. For the first time in 3 years, someone had seen past the wheelchair to notice something else about her. They talked for an hour, then 2. Jasmine colored on placemats. Troy spoke about woodworking with quiet passion. Rebecca found herself talking about her company's early days. She didn't mention more about the skiing accident, didn't dwell on the rebuilding. Somehow, that made it easier to just be Rebecca. The sun shifted lower. Other patrons came and went, and still they sat, words coming easily like old friends. Jasmine finally announced her tummy was making grumbly sounds. Troy checked his watch and his eyes widened. It's almost 5. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. We've completely monopolized your afternoon. Don't apologize, Rebecca said. This was the best afternoon I've had in a long time. Troy's expression softened. Me too, actually. He pulled out his phone. Would you want to exchange numbers? Maybe we could do this again sometime? Rebecca's heart did something complicated, hope and fear tangling together. I'd like that, she said, voice steady. Jasmine hugged Rebecca goodbye with fierce warmth. I'm glad we met you. You have a really nice smile. Rebecca watched them walk out, and something fundamental shifted inside her. She'd come expecting rejection. Instead, she'd found the possibility that someone might see her as whole rather than broken. Her phone buzzed. Troy's text thanked her for the afternoon. Jasmine hadn't stopped talking about the cool lady with the pretty chair. Would she want coffee next Saturday? Same time? Same place? Rebecca stared at the message for a long moment. 3 years of building walls. She typed, I'll be there. The next Saturday arrived, carrying Rebecca's anticipation. She spent too long choosing what to wear. A simple blue sweater, Valerie said, brought out her eyes. Comfortable jeans, small silver earrings. She told herself she wasn't nervous. The Riverside Café felt different when she arrived early again. Not a battlefield, but a place that held promise. When Jasmine burst through the door, her face broke into a grin so bright it could power the city. You came. Daddy said you would, but I was worried. Rebecca smiled. Nothing was more important than this. Over the next few weeks, Saturday afternoons at the Riverside Café became a ritual. Sometimes Troy brought Jasmine, sometimes he came alone. Each conversation peeled back another layer, revealing vulnerabilities and strengths. They moved beyond surface pleasantries into the real stuff of life. Troy told her about his wife who died from complications during childbirth. He'd held his newborn daughter while signing his wife's death certificate. He'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos at 2 in the morning. He'd built his woodworking business because flexible hours were non-negotiable. Rebecca told him about the accident. She'd been at the peak of everything, career taking off, life finally feeling balanced. She'd gone skiing in Aspen to celebrate, hit unexpected ice. The hardest part wasn't the physical therapy, she admitted. It was how people started treating me differently. Business partners suggested I step down. Friends stopped inviting me places. Men I'd been dating just vanished. Troy's jaw tightened. People are idiots, Rebecca corrected gently. People were scared. He reached across and took her hand. I don't see fragility when I look at you. I see someone who rebuilt her entire life. Rebecca's throat tightened as she explained the truth about the day they met, how she'd been stood up. Then Jasmine called my chair pretty. The first time in 3 years, someone had looked at it without pity. And you saw me. Not the wheelchair, not the CEO, just me. Troy's response was simple. Because that's who you are. Just you. And just you is pretty remarkable. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped. Rebecca felt something loosening in her chest, some tight knot of loneliness that had been there so long. But peace never lasted long. The first crack came when Rebecca invited Troy and Jasmine to a Tech Vision Company barbecue. Gregory Chen cornered her by the buffet. "So that's the guy you've been spending time with? The carpenter?" Rebecca's response was sharp. Troy's name was Troy. Gregory lowered his voice, suggesting she think about how this looked. She'd worked so hard to establish credibility. Now she was bringing around a guy who worked with his hands. "Let them talk," Rebecca said, but Gregory's words lodged under her skin like splinters. The second crack came when Troy's brother Marcus stopped by the workshop. "So you're the famous Rebecca," Marcus said, eyes assessing. "Troy talks about you constantly." Then he got blunt, asking if she was serious because Troy deserved someone all in. Not someone slumming it or using him as inspiration porn. I've seen it before. Rich people who think they're being progressive by dating down. Then reality hits, and they go back to their own world. He deserves better than being someone's charitable cause. Rebecca's hands gripped her wheelchair's armrests. "Troy is not beneath me. He's kind and authentic. You're not giving your brother enough credit." When Troy emerged and saw both their faces tight with tension, he knew something had happened. The drive back was quiet. Troy finally asked what Marcus had said. She admitted the truth. Marcus thought she'd eventually leave. Troy was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "Is he wrong?" Rebecca stared at him. "You think I'm going to leave?" Troy's response was painful, talking about her penthouse while he lived above his workshop. "Maybe we've been pretending that doesn't matter when it does. You belonged at that event, and I was just the guy throwing a frisbee." "That's not fair," Rebecca protested. "You were being yourself, and that's one of the things I love about—" She stopped. The word hung unspoken but deafening. Troy reached over and took her hand. "I need to think," he said quietly. "About what's best for Jasmine. About whether I'm being selfish, pursuing something that might not have a future." He kissed her forehead. Then helped her into her wheelchair. Then they were gone, leaving Rebecca alone with Troy's doubts echoing like ghosts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Valerie about an emergency board meeting. Of course. When it rained, it poured. The next 3 weeks felt like hell. The board meeting was brutal, Gregory rallying members with arguments about stronger leadership. He never said her disability out loud, but it hovered like smoke. Charts showed data about underperformance, client retention down, contracts lost. They needed leadership fully committed, fully present. Rebecca fought back with steel in her voice, her own data and projections, but she could see doubt in board members' faces. Was she spreading herself too thin? In the end, she won the vote by a narrow margin. The board would watch her more closely now. And through it all, she hadn't heard from Troy beyond polite but distant texts. His responses were cordial, but cold. They needed space. That word felt like a death sentence. Rebecca threw herself into work with ferocious intensity, arriving early and staying late. But late at night, when she returned to her condo, the loneliness settled back. She'd been lonely before Troy, but she hadn't known it. Now she knew exactly what the hole in her chest was shaped like, and it hurt worse than anything. Valerie found her one evening still at her desk at 8, staring at her screen. "We're talking about this right now," Valerie announced. Rebecca tried to deflect, but Valerie wasn't having it. She listed the facts bluntly. Rebecca had been working herself to death, hadn't smiled once. The carpenter who'd made her happier than Valerie had seen in years had disappeared. Rebecca finally looked up, tears in her eyes. "Troy decided we were too different, and maybe he's right." "Bullshit," Valerie said. "That man looked at you like you hung the moon. What happened?" Rebecca explained. Troy thought she'd realize he wasn't good enough. Valerie's response was fierce. "You fight for it. You fight the way you fought to keep this company, the way you fought through physical therapy. The way you fight every day just to exist in a world that wasn't built for you. Don't let fear win. Not his, not yours. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved. Fight for what matters. The words hit Rebecca like cold water, shocking her into clarity. Valerie was right. She pulled out her phone and typed, "I need to see you. Please. There's something I need to say, and I need to say it in person. You owe me that much." For a long moment, nothing. Then 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Riverside Café, tomorrow at 2. Just us." Rebecca stared at the message, heart hammering. This was it. Her chance to fight for something that mattered more than board votes. Her chance to fight for herself, for Troy, for the life they could build if they were brave enough. She typed back, "I'll be there." Rebecca arrived 30 minutes early, heart racing. She positioned herself at their corner table where everything had changed 5 months ago. The sunlight streamed through windows just like that first day, but everything felt different now, weighted with importance. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say 100 times. But when Troy walked through the door, face drawn with fatigue, all her prepared speeches evaporated. He sat down without a word, and the silence felt like a physical thing pressing down. Rebecca finally broke it. "I've missed you." Her voice cracked. Troy's expression crumbled. "I've missed you too." "God, Rebecca, I've missed you so much it physically hurts. Jasmine asks about you every day." "Then why are we doing this?" Rebecca leaned forward, hands flat on the table. "Why are we letting other people's doubts control our lives? Why are we giving them that power when this is our choice?" Troy's response came from somewhere deep. "Because I'm scared, terrified that I'm not enough, that you'll wake up one day and realize you've tied yourself to a guy who can barely make rent some months. I'm scared Jasmine will get even more attached, and then you'll leave, and she'll lose another mother figure. I can't put her through that." "And I'm scared too," Rebecca said, voice steady despite tears. "I'm scared I'm asking too much by dragging you into my complicated life with my demanding career and my disability. I'm scared the world will judge you for being with me, that people will look at us and see pity or charity. I'm scared my baggage is too heavy." The words hung between them. 2 people finally being honest about fears they'd been carrying alone, vulnerabilities they'd been too scared to share until now. "But you know what I'm more scared of?" She reached across and took his hands. "I'm more scared of losing you, of letting fear make my decisions, when courage is what got me through the last 3 years. I spent all that time after the accident, letting other people tell me what I could and couldn't do. I let them convince me I wasn't whole anymore. And then I met you and Jasmine, and for the first time, I felt like myself again. Not Rebecca, the CEO, or Rebecca in the wheelchair, just Rebecca. And she's someone worth fighting for." Troy's eyes were bright with tears. "I don't care about your wheelchair, Rebecca. I never have. You know that, right?" She nodded, squeezing his hands tighter. "I know. Just like I don't care that you're a carpenter instead of a tech executive. What I care about is that you make me laugh, that you see me as a whole person, that you listen when I talk without trying to fix everything. I care that you're raising an incredible little girl with so much love that you build beautiful things with your hands. That's who you are, Troy. Not your bank account, not your education level. You." "Then why does it feel like the whole world is telling us this is wrong?" Troy asked. Rebecca's response was fierce. "Because the world is afraid of things that don't fit into neat categories. Because people are more comfortable with assumptions than reality. My board members were ready to force me out because they think my disability makes me weak. Your brother thinks I'm going to hurt you because we come from different economic backgrounds. They're both wrong. The only people who get to decide if this relationship works are sitting at this table right now. You and me." Troy was quiet, thumbs tracing circles on the backs of her hands. What if it's hard? What if people keep judging us? Rebecca's answer was simple. Then it's hard, and we deal with it together. Look, I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. I don't know how to merge our lives seamlessly or make Jasmine feel secure when my schedule is unpredictable, but I know that I want to try. I know that what we have is real and rare and worth fighting for. And I know that I'm falling in love with you, Troy Bennett. Troy's breath caught. You're falling in love with me? Rebecca smiled through tears, nodding. I think I've been falling since Jasmine called my wheelchair pretty, and you didn't try to shush her. Since you sat at my table and treated me like a person instead of a tragedy. Since every moment we've spent together has made me feel more like myself. So yes, I'm falling in love with you, and I'm terrified. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone without you. The words hung in the air, filled with every vulnerability she'd been too scared to voice before. Troy stood up abruptly, and for one horrible moment Rebecca thought he was leaving. Instead, he came around the table quickly, dropped to his knees in front of her wheelchair, and cupped her face in his calloused hands. I'm falling in love with you too, he said, voice thick with emotion. I have been from the start. And you're right. I've been letting fear make my decisions. Fear that I'm not good enough. But the truth is, you've already changed our lives in the best possible way. Jasmine is happier. I'm happier. And I don't want to give that up. I want to fight for what we have. He kissed her then with a softness that held strength underneath, a promise being made without words. Around them, the cafe continued its rhythm, coffee brewing, conversations flowing. But in that moment, there was only the two of them and the choice they were making together. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling through tears, Rebecca felt something shift. So what now? She asked. Troy's answer was decisive. Now we stop hiding. We tell everyone we're together and serious. We figure out logistics like adults committed to making this work. We protect Jasmine by showing her what real love looks like. Imperfect, messy, but always worth fighting for. I can do that, Rebecca said, heart feeling lighter. One condition. We tell Jasmine together. She deserves to know this is real, that I'm not going anywhere, that she's part of this too. Troy's smile was brighter than the sun. She's going to lose her mind with happiness. Fair warning, she's been planning our wedding since week 2. Current plans involve 17 flower girls, a horse-drawn carriage, and a cake taller than she is. Rebecca laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep. I can work with that. They sat for another hour, talking through practicalities and possibilities, dreams about the kind of life they wanted to build together. The next few months brought integration and adjustment as their separate lives began merging into something entirely new. Troy introduced Rebecca to his family at a Sunday dinner that started awkward, with his mother fussing too much and Marcus avoiding direct eye contact. The air was thick with unspoken concerns and judgments as they sat around the worn dining table in the home Troy had grown up in. But it ended with his mother pulling Rebecca aside in the small kitchen, squeezing her hand with surprising strength. I can see the way he looks at you, she said, eyes warm with understanding and acceptance, like you're the answer to prayers he didn't even know he was praying. Thank you for being patient with him, with all of us, while we figured out what you already knew. The acceptance meant more to Rebecca than she could express, validation that she belonged in this family she was choosing. Rebecca brought Troy to a company gala the following month, and this time she didn't shrink from curious looks or whispered conversations that followed them around the room. She introduced him as her boyfriend, with pride and confidence, her voice clear and unapologetic, head held high despite the wheelchair. When Gregory made a snide comment about appropriate +1s and maintaining professional image, she shut him down publicly and professionally in front of half the board and several major clients. "Troy is my partner, in every sense of the word," she said firmly. Enough that nearby conversations quieted to listen. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, they're welcome to examine why they think my personal choices are their business instead of focusing on the work we're here to discuss. The board backed off after that night, several members later approaching privately to apologize. Some clients who'd been wavering renewed contracts, impressed by Rebecca's confidence and clarity about her priorities. Jasmine was over the moon with joy when they sat her down together to explain that Rebecca would be spending much more time with them, that this was serious and permanent. Rebecca started spending Friday nights at Troy's apartment above the workshop, helping Jasmine with homework and listening to her endless chatter about school drama and art projects. Troy taught Rebecca basic woodworking with infinite patience for her limited upper body mobility, creating adaptive tools that let her participate in sanding and finishing work. Rebecca introduced Jasmine to adaptive skiing programs, taking the excited little girl to watch Paralympic athletes train and explaining how people with different abilities could still do amazing things they loved. The look of wonder and possibility on Jasmine's face made every difficult conversation with doubters worth the effort. It wasn't always smooth sailing through calm waters. There were difficult conversations about boundaries and expectations that sometimes lasted late into the night. How to discipline Jasmine when Rebecca wasn't her biological parent, but wasn't quite just a friend either. How to balance Rebecca's demanding and unpredictable work schedule with Troy's need for consistency and routine with his daughter. How to handle the stares and sometimes cruel comments when they went out in public together as an obvious family unit. Some people assumed Troy was Rebecca's paid caretaker when they saw him helping her. Others thought she was his charity case or midlife crisis. Troy learned to hold her hand tighter during those moments of judgment. Rebecca learned to meet ignorant stares with confident smiles that said they had absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. But they worked through each challenge together with honesty and patience and humor, guided by the fundamental belief that what they were building was worth every difficult conversation, every awkward family dinner, every moment of doubt or frustration. 6 months after that pivotal day in the cafe when they'd almost given up on each other, Troy made Rebecca dinner at his apartment with Jasmine, conveniently at a carefully arranged sleepover with his mother. After dinner, nervous energy vibrating through his fingers, he took her hand and led her to his workshop. He told her to close her eyes until he said otherwise. When she opened them at his gentle prompt, in the center of the space sat a custom wheelchair built entirely by his own hands. "It's made from cherry wood with brass fittings," Troy explained, words tumbling out quickly in his nervous excitement about her reaction. "I designed it based on your exact measurements, but made adjustments for better lumbar support because you mentioned your back hurting after long days at the office. The wheels are standard medical grade for safety and reliability, but I carved your initials into the hubcaps, and see here." He pointed to the armrests with obvious pride in his craftsmanship. "I carved a pattern of mountains because you told me you missed skiing, missed the mountains, and that feeling of freedom. I thought maybe you could carry them with you this way, wherever you go." His voice was soft with love and hope that she'd understand what this represented. Hours of work, thoughtfulness, a future he was building for her. Rebecca reached out with trembling fingers to trace the carved mountains, each peak and valley rendered with meticulous detail, intricate and beautiful, and more personal than anything she'd ever received. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered, tears already forming despite her best efforts to hold them back. Troy knelt beside the wheelchair so they were at eye level, his expression vulnerable and hopeful and nervous all at once. "You taught me something important," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean pretending you're not vulnerable, that asking for help isn't the same as being weak, that love doesn't require us to be perfect. It requires us to be honest and show up for each other. You've made me a better father by example, a better person by inspiration. You've made me brave enough to believe I deserve good things, even when I'm scared I'll mess them up. Troy, Rebecca started, emotion choking her words before she could finish. He held up a hand gently, asking her to let him finish what he needed to say. He pulled a small box from his pocket with hands that shook slightly, and Rebecca's breath caught in her throat as understanding dawned. I know it's fast, maybe too fast by some people's standards. I know we're still figuring things out day by day. I know your career is demanding, and my schedule is complicated, and we have 100 logistics still to work through. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day without the promise that we're building a future together, that this is permanent. So, Rebecca Anderson. He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring with a small diamond that caught the workshop's overhead lights. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner, Jasmine's stepmom, and the person I get to love for the rest of my life? Rebecca's tears fell freely now, landing on the carved mountains of the wheelchair Troy had built with his own hands, each tear a testament to how far she'd traveled from that day in the café when a man had walked away because of her disability. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with overwhelming emotion, with joy, with the overwhelming certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Yes, I'll marry you. God, yes, 1,000 times. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, then kissed her with a depth and tenderness that held all the promises they were making to each other, promises of partnership, of facing whatever came together, of building a life brick by brick through choice and commitment. Around them, the workshop smelled of sawdust and wood oil, of creation and possibility, of futures being built from raw materials and love and determination. 1 year later, Rebecca sat at their corner table in the Riverside Café, but this time she wasn't alone, wasn't waiting, wasn't bracing for rejection. Troy sat across from her, hand linked with hers. Jasmine sat between them coloring, wearing a crooked flower crown and a dress with paint stains, because some things never changed. This was her family now, built not from obligation, but from courage and love. Look what I made, Jasmine held up her drawing proudly. It showed 3 stick figures, one standing, one in a chair with wheels, and one tiny figure between them, all holding hands. Above them, she'd drawn a sun and the words, "My family." Rebecca felt her throat tighten as she looked at the drawing. This was her family now, imperfect, unconventional, and more real than anything she'd experienced. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, watching a man walk away because of the wheelchair, convinced the accident had stolen not just her ability to walk, but her ability to be fully loved. She'd been so wrong. The accident hadn't stolen anything that truly mattered. It had stripped away the superficial and revealed who would stand with her. And in doing so, it had cleared space for something she never could have imagined. "What are you thinking about?" Troy asked, squeezing her hand. Rebecca smiled. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that Jasmine walked up to me that day and called my wheelchair pretty." Troy grinned. Best decision she ever made. Well, second best. First best was agreeing to have me as her dad. Jasmine giggled and rolled her eyes. "Daddy, you're so silly," Troy agreed cheerfully, adding that her mom loved him anyway. The word mom still made Rebecca's heart skip a beat. She'd legally adopted Jasmine 3 months ago. Helen, the cafe's manager who'd witnessed their entire story, appeared beside their table with a knowing smile. "Still sitting at the same table after all this time," she observed. "You two are going to have to put a plaque here eventually." Rebecca laughed and said not to give Troy ideas. They were playfully arguing when Helen returned with their usual orders, without being asked. On the house, she insisted. Consider it a celebration of love and family, of people who looked at what the world said was impossible and decided to do it anyway. I have something important to tell you both, Rebecca said, setting down her tea. Troy looked up with questioning eyes, and Jasmine paused her coloring. I've decided to step back from being CEO of Tech Vision. Troy's eyes widened. What? Rebecca, you love that job. You can't let Gregory push you out. Rebecca interrupted gently. I'm not being pushed out. This is my decision. I'm staying on as chairman, but hiring someone to take over day-to-day operations. Rebecca reached across to take his hand, and Jasmine's. It's because of perspective. That accident? It took my legs, but it didn't teach me the real lesson. You taught me that. You both did. Success isn't measured in company valuations. It's measured in moments like this, sitting with people you love. I want more time with you two. I want to be at Jasmine's school performances. I want to work with adaptive sports programs. I want to actually live my life. She squeezed both their hands. I can do more good with the foundation I'm starting. An adaptive sports foundation funded by my earnings, focused on providing equipment and opportunities for people with disabilities. Troy's designing specialized equipment. We're calling it the Second Chances Foundation, giving people the chance to redefine what's possible. Troy's eyes were bright. You're really doing this, Rebecca smiled. I'm building something new and meaningful. I'm choosing what matters most, and I'm terrified. But you taught me, being scared doesn't mean you don't move forward. Jasmine piped up. Does this mean you'll be home more? Can you come to my art show next week? Rebecca laughed. Yes, sweetheart. I'll be at your art show. Every single one from now on. That's the point. Jasmine went back to coloring, satisfied. Troy shook his head. You're amazing. The strongest person I've ever met. Rebecca disagreed. I'm not strong. I'm just finally smart enough to know what matters. I'm lucky. Lucky that a little girl thought my wheelchair was pretty and had the courage to say it. As the afternoon sun shifted lower, painting the cafe in golden light, Rebecca felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Contentment. The certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The accident had taken her legs, but had given her something infinitely more valuable, perspective about what actually constituted a life well lived. She'd been paralyzed by fear for 3 years, but Troy and Jasmine had taught her a different kind of strength. Not the kind that insisted on handling everything alone, but the kind that leaned into vulnerability and community and love without reservation. What are you thinking about now? Troy asked. Rebecca smiled. I'm thinking that I used to believe skiing down mountains was the most freedom I'd ever feel, but I was completely wrong. She gestured, encompassing their small table, their joined hands. This is freedom. This, right here. Being with people who love me, not despite my limitations, but alongside them. Who see my wheelchair as just another aspect of me. Who choose me every single day. This is what flying actually feels like. Not skiing down mountains, but building a life with people who see you completely and love you anyway. That's pretty sappy, Troy teased, but his eyes were soft. Says the man who carved mountains into a wheelchair and proposed in a wood shop. Rebecca shot back. Jasmine looked up with exaggerated exasperation. Are you two being all mushy again? Because Daddy gets really mushy sometimes, and it's kind of gross, but also kind of nice, Rebecca confirmed without embarrassment. Is that okay with you? Jasmine pretended to think seriously. I guess it's okay since it means you're happy. And when you're happy, we usually get extra dessert. They laughed together, a family sound, familiar and comfortable. They stayed at the cafe as the afternoon stretched into early evening, talking and making plans for their shared future. For Jasmine's upcoming birthday party, for the Second Chances Foundation's launch event, for their family vacation to an adaptive ski resort where Rebecca would get back on the slopes for the first time, this time with specialized equipment and her family cheering her on. Each plan was another thread, weaving their separate lives into a single shared tapestry. When they finally gathered to leave as the sun painted everything gold, Helen came over one last time. "Same time next week," Rebecca confirmed. "This is our spot, our sacred Saturday tradition." As Troy held the door and Rebecca wheeled through with Jasmine skipping ahead into early evening air, Rebecca took one last look back at their corner table bathed in fading sunlight. The place where a man had walked away because of her disability. The place where a little girl had seen beauty instead of limitation. The place where everything had changed. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives create necessary space for the best ones to emerge. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. Sometimes being paralyzed in one way sets you free in another. Rebecca had learned all of that one Saturday afternoon at a time. She reached for Troy's hand as they moved forward together. She wheeling, he walking beside her, Jasmine dancing ahead on the sidewalk. Not someone to fix her, or save her, or complete her, but someone to see her fully and choose her anyway. Someone to walk beside her through whatever came next, building a life together, one brave and imperfect and beautiful moment at a time. The riverside path stretched ahead golden in the fading light, and together, all three of them, this family they'd chosen and built and fought for, they moved forward into the rest of their story. Sometimes love finds you in the most unexpected places, wearing the most unexpected faces. All you have to do is be brave enough to say yes when it walks up to your table and calls you beautiful exactly as you are. And Rebecca, strong, stubborn, finally whole. Rebecca, who'd rebuilt her life twice, had said yes. To Troy with his calloused hands and generous heart. To Jasmine with her honest eyes and fearless love. To herself and the woman she was becoming. To the life she never knew she wanted but now couldn't imagine living without. Yes to everything that mattered. Yes